On a quiet Sunday afternoon in August of 2000, 50-year-old Bruce Leininger sat in his living room in Lafayette, Louisiana, watching his 2-year-old son James repeatedly smash his toy airplane into the coffee table. Over and over again, the little boy crashed the plane while yelling, plane crash, at the top of his lungs. Most parents would have just seen this as normal toddler behavior, maybe a little annoying, but ultimately harmless. But Bruce wasn't annoyed. He was deeply concerned. Because for months now, his son had been waking up 4 or 5 times a week in the middle of the night, screaming in absolute terror about being trapped in a burning airplane that was shot down by the Japanese. And James wasn't just having random nightmares. He was giving specific details about World War II battles, aircraft carriers, and pilot names that a sheltered 2-year-old from Louisiana should have absolutely no way of knowing. Bruce had taken his son to multiple doctors, and they all said the same thing. He's a kid. He'll grow out of it. But James wasn't growing out of it. He was getting more obsessed, and the details he was providing were becoming impossibly specific. But before we dive into today's story, if you love unexplained mysteries and bizarre true cases told through detailed narrative storytelling, then you're in exactly the right place. Because that's what I specialize in, and I upload new stories 3 to 4 times every week. So if that interests you, please like the video and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads. All right, let's get into today's story, which begins in Lafayette, Louisiana in the year 2000. James Madison Leininger was born on April 10, 1998 in San Francisco, California, to Bruce Leininger, a human resources executive, and Andrea Leininger, a former professional ballet dancer. The family moved to Dallas when James was 4 months old, then to Lafayette when he was about 18 months old. By all accounts, James was a normal, happy toddler. But shortly after his 2nd birthday in the spring of 2000, something changed. James began having intense, recurring nightmares that happened multiple times every single week. And they were always about the same thing. James would wake up thrashing in his bed, kicking his legs violently at the air, screaming about being trapped in a plane that was on fire and going down. His mother Andrea would rush into his room to find her son absolutely hysterical, yelling, "Plane on fire! Little man can't get out," over and over again. At first, Bruce and Andrea figured this was just a phase, but as weeks went by, the nightmares didn't stop. They got worse. James started talking about the plane crash during the day too. He became fixated on airplanes, but not in a fun way. He was obsessed with plane crashes. And here's where it gets really strange. James started providing specific details that made no sense for a 2-year-old to know. He told his parents that the Japanese shot him down. Not just generic bad guys, but specifically the Japanese military. Bruce and Andrea looked at each other completely baffled. Their son was 2 years old. He wasn't watching war movies. They had no idea where he was getting this. When Bruce asked James what kind of plane he was flying, James said it was a Corsair. Bruce had never even heard of a Corsair airplane before. How did his toddler son know this? Pediatricians and child psychologists all gave the same response. It's just an overactive imagination. Don't worry about it. He'll grow out of it. But Bruce couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more. So Bruce made a decision. Instead of trying to make the nightmares go away, he would lean into them. He would ask James for more details, write everything down, and see if any of it actually made sense. Over the next several months, Bruce became an amateur investigator, documenting everything his son said. James told him the Japanese military shot down his plane. He said it was a Corsair fighter plane. He said the plane took off from a ship called the Natoma. When Bruce heard Natoma, he immediately went online to research it. He was shocked to discover that the USS Natoma Bay was a real aircraft carrier that served in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Keep that detail in mind, because it becomes absolutely crucial later. In November of 2000, Bruce bought a World War II coffee table book as a gift for his father. One day, he opened it and showed James pages of various aircraft and battle scenes, asking if any looked familiar. James looked through several pages without much interest, but then suddenly he stopped. He pointed at one specific page and said, "That's where I was shot down." He was pointing at the Battle of Iwo Jima. Bruce felt chills run down his spine. The Battle of Iwo Jima was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific Theater, fought in February and March of 1945. But how could his 2-year-old son know anything about it? Bruce immediately began researching, looking for records of Corsair airplanes being shot down during the battle. Here's what gave Bruce momentary relief. He discovered that according to historical records, no Corsair airplanes crashed during the Battle of Iwo Jima. Bruce thought, "Okay, there's a hole in my son's story." This proves it's just his imagination, but Bruce couldn't find a complete list of pilots who had flown in the battle. He wanted to know if there had been any American pilots named James who were killed at Iwo Jima. So Bruce took things further. He discovered a veterans group for men who served in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Many were still alive and met regularly in San Diego. Bruce made up a cover story about working on a documentary and flew out to attend one of their gatherings. He began asking if anyone knew of pilots named James who were shot down during the battle. Multiple veterans directed him to the group's historian. Bruce approached him and explained what he was looking for. The historian thought for a moment, then gave Bruce an answer that would change everything. He said that during the entire Battle of Iwo Jima, virtually no American planes were shot down. However, there was one exception. A single U.S. Navy pilot was shot down and killed. And that pilot's name was James Huston Jr. Bruce's mind was reeling. The coincidence seemed impossible, but Bruce held on to one last shred of skepticism. James had specifically said he flew a Corsair. If James Huston Jr. wasn't flying a Corsair when he was shot down, then this was still just coincidence. Bruce and Andrea discovered that James Huston Jr. had a sister who was still alive. Her name was Ann Barron. They reached out to her, explaining the situation. Ann's response was unexpected. She didn't dismiss them. Instead, she sent them photographs of her brother from his military service. When Bruce opened the envelope and looked at the photographs, his whole world tilted. In one photograph, James Huston Jr. was standing in full pilot gear in front of his airplane, and that airplane was a Corsair, every single detail lined up. A pilot named James, shot down by the Japanese during the Battle of Iwo Jima, flying a Corsair from a ship. Bruce's mind flashed back to something else. Young James would sometimes insist he wasn't just James. He was James III. He would sign his drawings James III. Now it made perfect sense. James Huston Sr. was the pilot's father. James Huston Jr. was the pilot who died, and little James Leininger was James III. Bruce continued researching and learned that on March 3, 1945, Huston was on a mission near Chichi-Jima, part of the larger Iwo Jima operation. His plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire in the engine. Witnesses saw it catch fire and nosedive into the ocean. Huston had no time to eject. Bruce also discovered something else chilling. Young James had given his G.I. Joe dolls unusual names: Billy, Leon, and Walter. When asked why, James said, "Because that's who met me when I got to heaven." Bruce researched the USS Natoma Bay's casualty records. 3 Navy pilots from that ship had been killed before James Huston Jr. died. Their names were Billy Peeler, Leon Connor, and Walter Devlin. Bruce made contact with Jack Larson, who had been a pilot on the USS Natoma Bay alongside James Huston Jr. Larson was still alive in Arkansas. When Bruce told him about his son's memories, Larson confirmed the details. He remembered James Huston. He remembered the day Huston's plane was shot down. The Leiningers decided to share their story publicly. They were interviewed by ABC News. The story attracted massive attention. In 2004, Bruce and Andrea took young James to a USS Natoma Bay veterans reunion. The elderly veterans were stunned by the boy's knowledge. Then came the moment that convinced Ann Barron. When young James met her for the first time, he called her by a nickname that only her brother had ever used, a private family nickname never published anywhere. Ann broke down in tears. She became convinced her brother's soul had returned. The case attracted Dr. Jim Tucker, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia who specialized in studying children claiming to remember past lives. Dr. Tucker investigated extensively and published findings in peer-reviewed journals. He concluded this was one of the most compelling cases in Western history. As James grew older, the nightmares faded. By age 5 or 6, the vivid memories began to dim, but he never forgot entirely. Today, James is in his 20s, living a normal life in Louisiana. He maintains that what he experienced was real. The James Leininger case remains one of the most thoroughly documented reincarnation cases in modern history, with academic researchers at the University of Virginia validating many details James provided as a toddler. Whether you believe in reincarnation or not, the evidence is remarkable. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, I've got another mind-bending mystery you need to see. Click the video on your screen right now about the man who disappeared for 10 years and was found trapped behind a supermarket cooler. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories like this. Thanks for watching. Until next time, see ya.